This computer. Okay, everybody. This is FORTIUS podcast. I've got a man who needs no introduction, Judd Logan, second all-time USA hammer, Ashland University track and field director, four-time Olympian, and probably one of my strongest influence mentors in my career. Judd, how's it going?
It's going really well. I mean, we're in the throes of the indoor season. Our men's team is currently ranked second in the country. Last year, we pulled off the miraculous double. We'd never done it once, and so we decided to do it for the first time, and we won the indoor and the outdoor national championships, both by 1 point. So this last year was incredible. Building into this indoor season, we bring back a lot of those key components. And, you know, the NCAA championships are not won on paper. It's going to be done at the meet. And but we've got a team that I think can really be a challenger for a podium spot.
I remember how fun we had on those teams, like in mine and Crystal's time there. And I got to believe, like, it must be like incredible energy being around, like, and I'm from afar, and, you know, and I see him on Twitter and Instagram, and like Ernie's doing his thing, and like, and it's just so fun to like, to watch you guys kind of develop into like this powerhouse that, you know, started with like a couple of dudes throwing weights, you know what I mean?
It was. And, you know, in the Bill Gallagher days, they were really, really strong in the distance. And then he brought me in, and we added some throws, and we got really close a couple times. I think probably your year that you won, and we scored other points in the throws. I think we probably ended up 5th or 6th in the nation that year. Outdoors is when I was head coach, was the first trophy I ever won, I believe, was with you, outdoors, and Blaine Mag down in North Carolina.
Yeah, we named that one.
Yeah, I don't even remember.
For some reason, I want to say it was Ron Burgundy.
It might have been Ron Burgundy, because it was a really deep burgundy color trophy. We carried that thing with us everywhere we went. And that was my first podium finish. And who else did we have in the throws that year? I think we pulled DJ Duke's
Vickers was there, I believe. And
I know Blaine had a pulled muscle in his rib cage and got All-American points for us in the pouring rain in the discus. I remember you had a 76-meter opener in round 1 that was bogusly called a foul that caused you to kind of lose your mind.
Yeah.
And luckily you got a fair throw, but I think your other 5 were fouls trying to throw 80 meters.
You know, when you feel good, you feel good. Actually, I remember that story from who was that? Nick Cortis's perspective. He happened to be on the phone. I think it was Nick. Maybe it was Brightville. Anyway, and they were in the stands talking to someone, and I had taken that throw, and, you know, and it goes however far, and he said, like, he said it like fell quiet, and then people like started yelling, and then dude was like, who was that? Like, how far was that? I was like, I don't know, but it was really far.
Yeah.
And I didn't know that story until like a couple years later. I thought that was really cool to hear that sort of thing from you know, another perspective, right? Like being down on the field, it just seemed like whatever.
Yep. Yeah.
So this podcast is called FORTIUS. I'm kind of doing my FORTIUS thing over the last however many months, and the idea is to kind of have a bit of a universe and grow this thing out into mostly all things that kind of interest me. So, of course, that includes throwing. I want to know kind of like what made you from a mental perspective. What's kind of your first memory of, I don't know, trying to like dig deep, like, you know what I mean? Like get some of that grit to like get something done, and like what sport or what were you happening to be doing like at the time?
Well, the biggest thing that I can remember is I threw 171.11 in the discus and 49.10 in the shot out of high school. And I remember being recruited by Doug Raymond at Kent State. And he called me on the phone and he said, "You're going to be the next great American hammer thrower." He goes, "You're 6'4". You're only 190 pounds, senior in high school. Your dad played in the NFL. Your brother's a star at Ohio State. I know you didn't make it to the state meet and you had a bad, region meet, but trust me, you're going to be the great American hammer thrower." So I came to Kent State, played football. And so the whole summer I played, I got ready for football. The whole fall I got ready for football and, got my teeth kicked in a Division I program that was pretty good. We ended up going 7-4 that year, but I never played. And so when I reported to track practice for the first time, it was winter. And they handed me a 35-pound weight. And I'd never seen one before. I didn't know how to do a hammer turn. I didn't know how to do one heel turn. The only thing that I'd ever seen about the hammer throw was on America's Funniest Home Videos, where they showed an Italian guy tripping himself and falling. That's the only vision I had of the hammer. There was no internet. There was no videos that we had that they could show me. And the coach that was teaching me was 79 years old. So to make a very long story short, at the end of my freshman year, I threw 37 feet 9 inches in the weight off a 2-turn that took the entire ring. And when Doug Raymond came to me at the end of that year, he says, "Judd, I'm going to be 80. I'm retiring. I need to tell you something." I said, "Okay." He said, "You are not going to be the next great American hammer thrower. I thought you could be." He goes, "You only threw 37 feet. I've never had a freshman throw under 50. You only threw 140 feet in the hammer. I've never had anybody not throw 160 with me." And I said, "Well, how many of those people played football all fall?" He goes, "Well, none of them." And I said, "Well, I don't know what I'm going to do, but I'm going to be great at something." And he goes, "Well, just so you know, it's not the hammer." And so he retired. And the next guy they hired was a guy by the name of Al Bashan. And he was a master's. So he actually got in the ring and showed me what to do. And that's when I realized I was not an audio learner. I had to have visually somebody show me. And instead of just saying, "Do this," he got in there and he put my feet in the right position. And so I took a hammer home that summer. And before I came back for my sophomore year, I worked my butt off in the weight room. I became a starter on the football team. I was up to 230 pounds, and I was playing wide receiver. We were in a 5 wide receiver split, and my job was
Back then
on 99% of the plays was to go block the strong safety. I didn't catch a single pass, even though that I was a starter. We threw an average of 8 times a game. We were running like this spread offense, but we ran all this motion back through like a run and shoot and ran all these reverses. And all I did, and we went 4-7. The next year, I threw the hammer and the weight went 50 feet. And that's probably where I should have been my freshman year. And the hammer went, I think, 165 is where it should have been. And so then in my junior year, that coach left and took another job. And I went a period of time with no coach. And then finally, in my senior year, I quit football. Al Schotterman comes in. He's a 1972 Olympian. And he's the one that I bought into the system. You got to have a coach that you have buy-in with.
Yes.
And I like track, but man, the buy-in was there, and so I remember, I've told this story before, but I remember his first weight room workout for us was 4 sets of 15 in the snatch, 4 sets of 15 in the clean, and 4 sets of 15 in the back squat. And these were all from the floor, the Olympics. And if you did that today, you will lose your job. Right? But here's the cool news. Next week, we got to do 14s and then 13s and then 12s. And we built all the way down, and our backs were so sore and we were crippled. And next thing you know, he gives us a week off when we get to 8s, and we come back and all of a sudden stuff's going way farther. And it was one of the most archaic strength and conditioning programs, but we believed in what we were doing. So when we were asked to do 15s in the snatch, we did 15s in the snatch.
Yeah.
And, you know, I ended up throwing 196.10 and 59.11 in the weight my senior year. And, but it was Al Schotterman, my light giver, someone that was able to illuminate a path around me wider than what I could see about my future in me. But I only had him for 7 months, and my eligibility was done, and I still had another year of college left. So it was, I had some decisions to make.
So yeah. You've told some stories about Al, and you're right. I feel like there's always one, I don't know, maybe not one moment, but there seems to be like a moment, or maybe a small collection of similar moments for most people who go on to do things that either they thought they could do, or you know what I mean, didn't think that they could do, but there is that moment. So as you're telling that story of Al, I'm trying to think in mine, but it's in there.
Yeah.
There's several, right? So like if so graduating, like what then happened? Like, did you continue to train with Al post collegiately, or?
Well, I needed a whole nother year to graduate
Okay.
because it was going to take me 5 to get my education. And he said, look, I'll leave you on your scholarship, but I want you to continue to train. And so that year, and the only reason I don't use meters as often, because back then it was feet and inches in college. And so I threw in my first year being like post-collegiate, or I'm sorry, no eligibility. This is 1982. I threw 65 feet in the weight, and I threw the hammer 64 meters, 210 feet. And I had my college degree. I had a job offer at a little known cable company that did sports news in Bristol, Connecticut, where I had read in the trade magazines, and I had sent my videos and Betamax to this company called ESPN that wasn't even in the state of Ohio yet. And they hired me, and I had a job. I was going to marry my high school sweetheart, Jill, and we were going to move to Connecticut. And next thing you know, I went over to say goodbye to Al, and I thanked him for everything he'd done for me. This was 1982. And I said, I just wish we could have had more time together.
I was 1 year old, by the way.
Yeah, there you go. Thanks for that.
So there's that.
Yeah. So I said to him, I'd like to stay in touch. I'll write you some letters from Connecticut. And he says, the Olympics are in 2 years. And I said, yeah, in Los Angeles. I said, how cool is that? He says, how would you like to go? And I looked right at him, and I deadpanned, you have tickets already? And I had no idea what he was asking me. He says, you give me the next 2 years of your life. You get out of this college bar scene. You start taking yourself seriously and train only the hammer, get married, solidify your life. And if you give me the next 2 years of your life and believe in me, I will put you on the Olympic team. So I went home and I talked to my wife, and she goes, does this mean we get to stay in North Canton, Ohio? And I said, yes. She goes, great. I love it. You can get a part-time job. I want you to train for the Olympics. I went to my parents and asked them, or told them the same scenario. And both my mom and dad at the same time said, how did Al get tickets? And I just looked at him and I said, he thinks I can be on the team. And they said, how many do they take? And I said, they take 3. And they said, where are you ranked right now? And I said, number 22. And they said, okay, son, go live your dream. It's going to be really hard for you and your wife financially, but go live your dream. And so in 1983, I threw 68 feet in the weight, and I threw 67, 70 in the hammer. But here was the crucial thing. I made my first team. There used to be a meet back in the day called the United States Olympic Festival.
Yeah.
And they took 2 from the West, 2 from the East, 2 from the South, and 2 from the North. And if you were really good, you might turn that meet down because it was always in the United States. But I got my first gear from Levi's, believe it or not, was the sponsor. We got sweatpants from Levi's, and I got USA team gear and made my first team and met guys that I rarely ever saw. Dave McKenzie, John McCardle, Peter Farmer. And each of those guys came to me and said, Andy Bassett, these guys were like right at the American record, all of them. And they each took time on their own and took me out. And they said, you've got to learn to do 4 turns. And I said, okay. Because really my 2-turn and my 3-turn were about the same distance. I could 2-turn 66 meters and 3-turn 67. They said, you got to learn to do 4 and develop a rhythm. And they had trained with this guy over in Scotland. They'd gone over to visit this guy by the name of Stuart Toger. So like their technical advancement was ahead of me. And then Stuart was actually now in the country, and I got to meet him at a clinic. But anyways, these guys convinced me to do 4 turns, and Dave McKenzie taught me how to do a toe turn. So I went home that winter, and when we couldn't get outside to throw, I just did turning drills, right hand, left hand, walk around drills. We had a board that was about 2 feet long that had 2 nails in the middle, and we held the board at the edges, and we learned to push the hammer or sweep the hammer and have no you couldn't use your left side when you had the board in your hands.
Yeah.
And so I knew it was going to go well when I went to indoors that year, and my first throw was 75 feet 3.5 inches to break the American record in the weight throw with the old iron weight in Jadwin Gymnasium at USA's. We threw on dirt, not off of dirt, but onto dirt.
Yeah.
And yeah, it's not that long ago. So man, everything was going unbelievably well. And then I went to my first outdoor meet in the hammer, and I threw 237 feet, over 72 meters. And
how many years in, where are we at now? This is year 3, year 4?
Okay, so I graduate in 82 or 81. I do my 5th year in 82, and then train with Al in 83 and 84. So this is 8 years in, but in actual terms of training the hammer and throwing it more than 2.5 months a year, this is year 3.
Yeah.
Okay.
It's funny. I think I'm the same, like between my couple of years in Moore Park and then coming to Ashland, I think I was to 75 in 3 years.
Right.
Actually, right. Cause I don't count Georgia. I threw like, I don't know, hammer maybe twice a month, maybe.
Yes. Yeah. So I was playing football. I wanted to be a discus thrower, all of those things. So at that point, I said to Al, I said, how do you think about 237? He says, the American record's only 244. And I said, oh, I never even knew what the American record was. So here I am training, again, there's no internet. There's no group of people talking. There's only Track and Field News, the Bible of our sport, that is doing rankings. And even when I threw 67 meters, and it was the 6th or 7th best throw in the country, I didn't make the top 10 rankings because I never competed out of the state of Ohio. So in 84, I went in to that year not ever being ranked in the top 10 in the United States. And then I open at 237. And so they tell me, you gotta go to Mount Sac. You gotta go to Modesto. And so I started going to those meets, and I think I threw over 70 meters, but not great against those guys. And just remembered to myself that I'll be better the next time I see those guys. I kind of got caught up in the moment. So I went to the Jesse Owens meet in probably the first week in May of 1984. The trials are coming about 8 weeks away. And I threw 74.44. And I broke Dave McKenzie, the guy who taught me to do 4 turns.
Yeah.
I broke his American record by, I think, 1.5 inches. They had no steel tape. So what they had to do was they created this, they found the grounds, because the meet used to be on a Sunday. So they found the grounds crew. They got a big steel spike. They drove it down, and then they put cones and like tape around it so no one would move the mark. Then they spray painted the hole, and then they came back on Monday when they could get access to a steel tape and called me and said, "Congratulations, you've been certified as the new American record holder." And so I was feeling pretty good about myself. And I think literally 5 days later, Bill Green threw 75 meters.
Yeah.
And, you know, so I was like, I had that first feeling of having a record and then a feeling of loss. So went to that first Olympic trials. Al Schotterman was actually training with me after a 10-year layoff. He took 4th in the Olympic trials at just over 70 meters.
Huh.
And, you know, Bill Green won the trials. Ed Burke was 3rd, and I was 2nd. And, you know, the story goes, I went to the opening ceremonies, and after seeing Jesse Owens' granddaughter run in the Olympic torch and hand that off to Rafer Johnson, considered one of the greatest decathletes in the history of the United States, he zigzags up the podium, lights the Olympic torch. Edwin Moses gives the Olympic creed, and they start the Olympic games. And I look around and I said, this is the coolest thing I've ever been a part of in my life. And I want to do this again, but have a 2 to 3 year preparation period where I could be one of those people that could actually compete. And I didn't do bad at the Olympic Games. I missed the Olympic final by 12 inches. And Bill Green made it, and I think he ended up finishing 6th. And then, you know, after we had traded the American record a couple of times, I think I broke it 7 more times, and, you know, never relinquished it until 94 when Lance threw 82.
Lance, yeah. We'll be having conversations with him, I think, too, in the near future. So I think the going from 3 to 4, that's kind of, if we're going to talk about hammer throwing specifically, like, so I had that kind of period as well. Going from Moore Park to, you know, and Moore Park was kind of like with Coach Matt McKay, Lucas's dad, and that experience there kind of opened my eyes to like essentially what not only this sport can bring, but also like the experiences that I could have, right? Because growing up and I'm in high school and everyone's like, oh yeah, you're gonna be an Olympian, and it's like, and it's cool, and it's so appreciated because, you know what I mean, like that's other people kind of believing in you and seeing things. But at that time I was a discus thrower, you know what I mean? And so that's what my scholarship was, and like hammer was always kind of like, yeah, this is cool, and it's like, it's actually kind of fun after hating it for months when I first started.
Right.
So anyway, and so part of like some of these experiences I was having was interacting with Hal Connolly, either at camps or just him being at competitions. And Moore Park is just outside LA. If some of you guys aren't aware of where that is, usually people in LA have no idea where Moore Park is. So it's heaven on earth. And I remember this one, I forget what year it was. It was probably it's probably 2000, maybe 2000. maybe 2002. When did I come to Ashland? 2003. So I think it was
Yep.
2002 spring, and I saw him. I don't know. Let's say February, March, and he watches me. It was at the Erie Clinic.
Yep.
And we have a talk, and he's like, you have all of these things and blah blah blah. You're fast, blah blah blah. You need to be doing 4 turns, because at the time I was still doing 3, and I'm like, yeah. Actually, Coach Mack and I, we've been kind of talking about, but we just haven't really gotten into it yet. Okay. So fast forward, I don't know, let's say I think it was about 4 weeks later, and then we're at a meet in, I want to say San Diego. We're at San Diego State, and he's there. I don't think I realized I was going to be there, and he like signals to me, like gives me his finger,
Hmm.
and then I walk over there, and he straight up cusses me out. He's like, "You're not doing 4 turns yet. I told you to do 4 turns," and I'm like, "Dude." I tried it for a couple of days, and it just wasn't working. And then we decided to stay with 3, and after a few more cuss words, and like from that moment on, it was like 4 turns. Like there was no more looking back. I think it's interesting sometimes having someone that basically just kicks you in the ass and says, go. What I
And
mean?
he was great for that. And
Yeah.
when people ask me about my mentors, of course, it started with Doug Raymond, who thought I could be a great American hammer thrower for whatever reason, because I was 6'4" and I had good genetics, to telling me that I was never going to be that guy, to Al Schotterman, and then to meeting Stuart Toger. And then one of the greatest trips of my life is when I was the hammer ambassador for the United States. I got to go to Szombathely and I in Hungary for a clinic for 5 days. And Harold was my roommate. And so we went everywhere together, man. And it was some of the best time to share and be mentored by him that I had ever had. And then you think about Dave McKenzie and Andy Bissett and John McCardle and Peter Farmer and all these guys that were willing to grab me and take me aside. And they said, look, you're strong and you're fast, but you're making so many technical errors that if you learn this stuff, dude, you're going to throw 80 meters someday. And I'm like, yeah, 80 meters, the world record 78, which I think it was at that time by Bondarchuk, I think might have had the world record 83, 84. I think
his PB was I want to say 77:42, if I'm not mistaken.
Right.
Yeah.
So so I've just been blessed by so many people. But then with Stuart in 1985, my first year after the Olympics, where I decided I was going to do this full time and really invest. I got a Nike contract. I got USATF funding. We did the American Big Guys poster, all of that kind of stuff. And so I started flying out to see Stuart 3 times a year. But then in the fall, I would fly him out to see me because I wanted my training partners to know what he was talking about. I wanted them to hear from him. And so Stuart kind of became my main coach. And, Coach Schotterman had taken me about as far as he could and, had other priorities. But Stuart was just, somebody that, I really, really connected with. And then, of course, started training with Kenny Flax, and I started training with, Lance and, some of these other guys from back in the day, and Pat Egan and Johnny Walker, names you may not know, but these were guys.
I know those, man. I had the videos, the old VHSs.
Yeah. So they would fly out to see me, and then we would have training camps together. And, I remember going to my first meet of the year in 1985, and there was a trip to Germany on the line. And I wanted to be that guy that they chose for that trip, USA versus Germany and Russia. And that was going to be, it was in Bremen. It was just this tri-meet. And so, I had an opportunity. My first meet, I threw the American record, 76.88, I think. And then, went on to throw 77 that year. And, you know, I went to Germany and I competed internationally for the first time. I made my first World Cup team in Canberra, Australia, and befriended Yuri Tam. And he invited me to come train, introduced me to Dr. B. And for whatever reason, the Russians would not give any of the other American hammer throwers the hall pass. And they didn't know, you know, why. I didn't know exactly why. But you know, Tam and I had exchanged uniforms in 1985, and you know, I got to know those guys, and Sergei Litvinov, who he was always the quiet one. He spoke very little English around us. He knew he could understand English. He didn't trust himself to speak it. Sedek was very good, and Tam was very, very good.
Yeah.
And
it's kind of like that now, even with Sergei passing, but even at the end, you explained it just right. Like, I think he can a little bit, but, you know, just never quite spent time in learning it that much.
Yeah. So I just look at all the valuable mentors I had. It's, you know, the ego cannot allow us as an athlete to name one person in our journey. You're just leaving out so much. And, you know, for these people to say, well, I had my college coach, and then I went on, and between my college coach, you know, that's all I ever had. And I'm like, baloney, dude. Then you never threw as far as you were going to throw if you didn't have training camps with other athletes, if you didn't share ideas, if you didn't mentor younger athletes, if you didn't, you know, push yourself out to the edge of the branch where the fruit is. A couple of those branches may snap, but then you learn these valuable nuggets, and you move forward. And so I was willing to, you know, kind of be the risk taker of the group. And, you know, I was that guy that in 1991, after my most disappointing finish at the World Championships, 2:00 in the morning, knocked on Dr. Bondarchuk's door and told him I needed help. And dude opened the door in a white singlet t-shirt and a pair of boxer shorts, and invited me into his room. And for the next hour, we talked about training. And it wasn't a fluent conversation, because his English at that time was good, but not what you would consider fluent. And next thing you know, he rips off 3/4 of a cigarette pack of paper and writes me a 12-week program. And, you know, that's funny to hear from you that you never got a typed program or everything was written on scrap paper.
Everything was whatever, was within arm's reach.
So that's what he did. And, you know, so I got to add Dr. B to that list, because I did that program initially. I did the Bondarchuk system, or at least the system as it was, for 12 weeks, and went down to a training camp, and Stuart Toger said, "This is the best you've ever looked." And it was, we weren't sharing information. I was just doing his program. And I threw 78 meters in December. But then afterwards, I figured, well, if I'm at 78, I'll just jump back into my own stuff now. And, you know, I didn't have somebody to be there constantly to mentor me and to remind me and to fine tune the way Dr. B did with you. You know, I remember you calling me and he says it's going to take about 1.5 years.
Yeah.
And I'm like, oh, that's baloney. I've worked with athletes and helped them improve 3 meters in a weekend.
Yeah.
And he goes, yeah, you know, you may have helped them improve 3 meters in a weekend, but, you know, that's feeding them. He's teaching me to feed myself.
Yeah.
And right. So wasn't that who that guy was for you? And
I mean, it's like, it's seriously like the same story. I mean, you know, departing Ashland, like for as hard as that was for us, like I had graduated, it was kind of a natural transition, right, is probably the best word. And we had a couple options of like things to maybe do, and among them was like just stay in Ashland, and then with the I might have been number 2 in the U.S. in '08, but I think I was first by like a couple inches with AG, right? It was usually the
Yep.
tournaments for however long, and not even actually I did make the finals by the skin of my teeth, and then fouled out in final, and it was like
Right.
it was just this moment of like I need to do something. I went from, and I actually just shared this story, like up to that point, like my story and what I was trying to do was to be the best, like in the US. And all it took was for me to foul out when I felt amazing. You know what I mean? You know how I felt in those programs. Like I
Yep.
felt like Superman. I could do anything. I could run through a wall and like, and just brush the dirt off my shoulder. And it turned into like, it just hit me. And it was like, well, yeah, I want to be the best in the US, but that was at a time when, the best in the US was well behind everyone else in the world. And I was like, nah, best in the US isn't good enough anymore for me. Um, and that's when I was still like, well, maybe I can do this, or I can go to the center, or go with wherever else. And I was like, well, if this is what it is that I'm trying to do, and we've got this guy in Canada who's been there, done that, I was like, I'd be an idiot not to do it, right? And so and that's what kind of spawned that decision. And yeah, but like you're right, we get there and he tells me it'll take year and a half or so, and then my ego is like, yeah, whatever, dude. Like I've never been in a program that I didn't just excel at. Like I fully expected to PR, which would have been anything over 76 after transitioning from Ashland, and and it wasn't that. I think I competed 3 times. The third of which was USA's that I pulled out of because I was injured. Like I just couldn't do anything. I finished with a season best of 68 meters, I think.
Yeah.
But I mean, that can be a longer conversation another time. So, yeah, like just the path and the people's influences that we have are really special. I want to know, like, was it hard, or how did you come to grips with knowing and especially being told how good of a physical athlete you were? Because I feel like that's something that you and I kind of share. I spent all of those years being told how good of an athlete I was, but like I wanted to be a hammer thrower, you know what I mean? And to see that through.
The biggest thing for me is that I was hoping I had that genetic potential, but nobody really around the sports world saw it in me like they saw it in you at the high school level. And so you have to remember, back in that day, there was no until Al Schotterman came in 1980, 81, I hadn't even done an Olympic lift, and I was in my 4th year of college. And so when people talk about, I played wide receiver, so I had good speed, I had good arm length, I had good height. But the bottom line was, I didn't know I really had the genetic potential until I started working hard enough where then my vertical jump went from 26 to 32 from doing plyometrics and Olympic lifts, where everybody else improved 2 inches, I improved 6 inches. And then when we started doing power cleans, I improved 60 pounds on max day. Everybody else improved 15 pounds. And so then I started saying, well, maybe I do have some of Pop's genetics in me. So it wasn't till later that I realized that maybe I did have the genetic makeup, because, I didn't make the state meet my entire career. And I went through 3 coaches in 4 years in college, and was basically a professional alcoholic for 6 months when I had no coach, waiting for Coach Schotterman. So, my genetic potential, it may have lied there, but I went to college at 17 years old. I was an ADD kid that my mom couldn't take it anymore, and begged them to bend the rules and let me start kindergarten. She needed me out of the house. And I was on Ritalin by the age of 12. So
Yeah, weren't you? Or that's a true story, right? That's from your lips. You were the first.
yeah, I
First
was I
case in
was in the
Ohio.
I was the first group. There was, I think, 15 kids
Yeah.
in the state of Ohio by a guy by the name of Dr. Timmons, and he was the first group to prescribe Ritalin to us. It was in the 60s and late 60s. I think it was maybe 69 going into 70. And, it was an amazing thing for me. Like, it settled me down and I did way better in school. But the bottom line was I went to college very immature, very undertrained, very underdeveloped. And when I started having someone show me this is how we're going to train, well, then my results just tripled what everybody else was doing at the time, because those genes were there. And then when I got passionate about it, when I just said to myself, and I got caught up in the same thing you did, I wanted to be the best American hammer thrower.
Yeah.
I saw a video, the very first video I saw, someone sent me a Super 8 reel. Somebody from New England that ran this New England hammer letter, Kevin McGill.
Yeah.
Kevin McGill, and that was awesome, waiting for that monthly publication, or sometimes it was 2 months, and we'd read these articles. And he sent me this video, and I bought a Super 8 projector, and it was somebody literally at a training camp, I believe it was in Italy, and they were filming from the bushes. And it's video of Tam, Sedek, Niculin, Sedek, Tam, Niculin training in Litvinoff. And he's like, he calls me, he goes, "What did you think?" And I said, "Well, my projector must be screwed up because the speed's not right."
Yeah.
And I said, "It's at about a 1.5 speed, and I can't watch it slow enough to understand what's going on." He goes, "Judd, that's regular speed." And I was like, "There's no way," because no one in the United States was throwing like that.
Yeah.
So it was this black and white video.
Pretty sure I know that video, man. That's like the one from Dr. B would know. Anyway, I can't think of it, but yeah, the one of Sergey from like that video, opportunity is like, it's one of my favorite throws all time. Like, it's almost like you can't make it look any easier and go any farther than that throw. You know what I mean?
Right. And look, they weren't throwing 86 right then.
Yeah.
But they were just cusping that 80 to 82 foot throw, 82 meter throw. And I just couldn't believe that a human could go that fast. And yeah, what a lesson. What a wake up call.
So we'll probably, yeah. Do you have a story, like, when did it get hard? So you're a pro now. You could say you ascended fairly rapidly as an American hammer thrower, especially, and then getting into the world. But like, when did it get hard? When did it suck?
1988, 86. I go to Mount Sac and I throw against Juha Tiainen, the Olympic gold medalist from Finland from 84. And now it's 2 years later, the guy who didn't make the final versus the gold medalist. And I threw 80, 88 against Juha Tiainen, and he threw 79. And I won Mount Sac and beat the Olympic champion. And then 87, I didn't PR, but I threw 79-26 at USA's. And I said, okay, I've got this. Going to 88, I said, I'm going to medal. And I worked my ass off. I was doing plyos. I was doing sprints again. Got my weight down from 275 to about 268, which doesn't sound like a lot. The cortisol levels were down. Body was feeling good. And I called Toger and I said, hey, I'm going to open up in April over at Penn State. Here's the problem. I'm in American record shape right now. What should I do? And he goes, go get your mark, and then we'll rebase your training. So I go over to Penn State and I throw 81-88 on a 51-degree day against no competition. And driving home, I looked to my training partner, a guy by the name of Dave Duchesne, and I said, after what happened today, I can't envision ever throwing under 80 meters ever again. That's how effortless that throw was. And
I had that exact conversation with myself once.
Yeah.
In 2011.
So I go out, and what I decided to do over the next month is I decided to do some depth jumps. And I'd read this study because I got all these publications, again, no internet. And I saw that Russian athletes were doing in-depth jumps from 3 meters. Some of the things that I didn't read is that they said in the article that the athletes had to be coaxed, and later found out they were triple jumpers and that they were landing on a gymnastic mat. But they were saying that they had the greatest increase in residual fast twitch muscle fiber in their leg, shown by these scans. And I said, oh, perfect. So I went out to my Malone College near my house, and I brought a ladder, and I climbed up on the rim, and I would just step off and land and try to land in a quarter squat. Back up the ladder I went, jump off the rim, land in a quarter
squat. And like static, yeah. Or
yeah. Just give a little bit,
right.
But don't go down into a full squat.
Right.
And so anyways, my training started going through the roof. And I'm like, oh man, I'm really on to something here. And I think my light balls went, I think my 6K PR was like 82 meters. And now I'm throwing 87s and 88s. Like it's just literally nothing. Like it's literally nothing. It's the in-depth jumps. It's the depth jumps. And so I kept pushing those. And then I just remember going to a movie one night with Jill, and I went to get up, and my left hip felt like it didn't want to help me get up. And I'm like, it's just, man, something's going on in there. So I went to the doctor, and he goes, yeah, you probably got an inflamed IT band. And I'm like, what is an IT band?
Yeah.
And he goes, it's called the iliotibial band. It runs from your meniscus in your knee all the way up into your hip. And so that should have been the point where I realized, dude, you better watch yourself. But again, I was coaching myself. I had it all figured out. I had just opened up at 81-88 and had marks in training that were predicting 84, 85 meters. And the world record was at 86, and the Olympics were coming, and I was getting these sponsorship deals, and I just kept training and training and training. And the moral of the story was I threw 268 in April. I threw 258.8 at Jesse Owens. I threw 248.8 at the U.S. Olympic trials, and I threw under 238 at the Olympic Games. And I had just completely overtrained and destroyed my body. And I'd gone through 3 cortisone shots in my hips just to be able to walk. And here's the other moral. When the light ball distances started to fall, more caffeine in practice. Then I mount more caffeine. What I realized is I made every practice a competition, and I completely blew through my adrenals.
Gotcha.
I needed surgery on my hip, and I was having to overhype myself for practice, and had lost this promise I had made to myself back in September that I was going to do it right this time.
Yeah.
But I didn't have anybody to hold me accountable. I was coaching myself, other than the video camera and flying out to see Stuart. But he didn't see the asshole that I was becoming in the weight room. He didn't see, he would have never let me jump off a basketball rim. onto concrete.
Well, he might have let you for once just so you can laugh.
Yes, yes. So that finish at the Olympic Games, I think I ended up 17th or 18th when I should have been a medalist. That was 88 should have been my year.
Yeah.
And it took a lot of soul searching because I had that hip surgery, and that really set me back. And then it wasn't until 92 that I had an opportunity to remember when I said I was going to throw over 80 meters in every meet for the rest of my life. It wasn't until round 6 of the Olympic trials in 1992, over 4 years later, when Lance passed me, that I threw 80-12 and only had my 80-meter throw for the second time of my life, 4 years and 4 months apart.
That was Olympic trials, right? That's the Olympic trials record.
Yep. Yep.
Hey, well,
I think that's one that's got a chance to stand for a while.
In 2011, that's, I mean, aside from making the team, of course, like I wanted to take that record and just be like,
I wanted you to get it.
Exactly. Cause like who else? Right. And I don't know. And, 2012 was what it was, but, yeah, cause that's a strong record. Cause it's only every 4 years.
Yep.
And you got to show up on the day. That's it. There's no other opportunities. That's an impressive one.
Yeah.
I'll let you know if I'm in shape this year. I don't know about that. So, let's hear, like, do you have a health update for us? Like, what's going on?
Yeah. And look, Kip, we could talk for hours upon hours upon hours. So after you get your first 30 podcasts done, have me back on and we'll really get into some stories.
Right on.
Okay.
Yeah.
Because I've got them and I'll share them. You know that. Health update wise, last March, I was diagnosed with a form of leukemia called B-cell ALL, lymphoblastic leukemia. And obviously, shocker, at age 59, I was able to get in with some of the best doctors and a clinical trial at the Cleveland Clinic. I was supposed to be in the hospital for a minimum of 6 weeks, possibly 8 to 10. And after 2 weeks of being in the hospital, the doctors booted me and said, "You're ready to go home." Not that you don't still have leukemia, but you're too healthy to be in a hospital because there's more germs here than there are in your own home. And we trust you. And then about 3 weeks later, I found out I was in remission, which means that when they did a lumbar puncture, and they did a bone marrow biopsy, and they did another test called the minimal residual disease test. They found 0.00 leukemia cells in my body. And so the chemo's working. I'm 42 weeks in remission. I'm still on chemo until June 15th. And I get it sometimes once every 8 days. Yeah. Sometimes I'll get it 4 days in a row that I won't have it for a month.
So there's a certain amount of time that they kind of just keep touch with it until they can, I don't know, officially say like cured or
yes. Yes.
Yeah.
So June 15th, if I show all clean, then I go on a maintenance program, which is I'll receive some chemo every 3 months for a year and a half, just to make sure that if there's any immature cancer cells that, weren't killed the first time around. But right now, the diagnosis is very good.
Right.
But, a lot can change in the world with people's health. A lot can change for the good. A lot can change for the bad. The biggest thing is they tell me is that the reason they think that I made such what they call an amazingly quick recovery and getting this disease out of my body, was mental attitude and support system. Those two things. And I'm like, that's what I'm built for this.
Yeah.
This is what, look, you have to be an Olympic hammer thrower. You have to have a support system.
Yes.
Meaning my wife and my kids and my team and people around the country. And you have to have a belief in yourself.
Yes.
And we look at that as easy.
I said, yeah, there's a bit of luck too, right? Because there's an element of what you can't control, but within what you can't control is what you can control in terms of just being, you know what I mean, chill and relaxed about it, you know?
Right.
Yeah, one might say it was a FORTIUS mindset.
There you go. But right now, I've only had to miss 2 days of work over the last 7 months. All of my chemo is outpatient, with the exception of one drug. I have to go in and be monitored for 24 hours. Then they send me home with a fanny pack of drugs that is hooked up to me for 30 days. And it delivers a small little blast of chemo every 4 minutes for 30 straight days. And I wear it when I'm in the shower, and it's got a long cord on it so I can put the fanny pack outside the shower. But, you know, it's one of those, it is what it is type of things.
Yeah.
And I've done very well with all the therapies. And I've done some infomercials for the Cleveland Clinic. I'm trying to give back and talk on cancer awareness as often as I can. And my kids have rallied around me. When I say my kids, I'm talking about Jenna, Nathan, Kirsten, my brothers and sisters. But when I also say my kids, and my own kids know this, I have an extended family of kids, and you're one of them, and Crystal's one of them. Yeah. And you guys have just grown up and got a little older, and now I've got 18 new kids that you know, some of them you've met when you came and visited us, and some of your younger brothers and sisters you never met before. Yeah. Because that's how big that Ashland family tree is. But I'm blessed.
Like
medically,
the uncle everyone hears about, but they only see like 2 times in their life. You know what I mean?
Yes, exactly. But it's an incredible family, and the support system is great. I feel great. I feel energized. I love what I do. I'm not sure I could have handled this disease in a job that felt like work. And like I said, my wife has just been amazing in anything that I need, you know, medically, food wise, sleep wise. She just makes sure that happens for me.
Right. Well, that's such great news. And I know, like, you know, I can probably speak for the majority of the throws world. Like that was like a what? Like, you know what I mean? Like, it's like, you know, it's when Iron Man or Superman goes down, right? It's just one of those things that you just don't think could ever happen, let alone like it actually did. So, yeah, I know I'm very grateful for it, and I love like the support team around you guys, and it's great to, I don't know, just kind of feel that energy from afar. So I want to thank you for being on, and for sure I'm going to take you up on coming back again as this thing kind of grows into whatever it happens to be. So thank you. And
hey,
if you have any other words, like last minute things to add, and then we'll say see ya.
The only last words would be, what a privilege and an honor it is to be number one, and to think that you reached out to me. It goes a long way into our relationship. And you know, a lot of people thought when you left Ashland that, you know, everyone was like, oh, what happened?
Yeah,
and
I
then,
still to this day get that question. I'm like, dude.
yet nothing happened.
Yeah.
And then when you didn't do well your first year, everyone's like, oh man, see. And I'm like, guys, the guy that coaching him has coached 40 guys over 80 meters. Yeah. I've coached 0. So give him a year. And then you threw 80 and everyone's like, oh man, you were right. I'm like, guys, I know Kib. I know Dr. Bondarchuk. So thank you for that honor. And I can't wait, because I think you're going to be a great podcaster. And I'm so happy to have been first.
Yes. Awesome. All right. Thank you, Judd.
All right, buddy. Take care.
Take care.